Well, good morning, brothers, sisters, comrades. The purpose of this demonstration is to publicise the situation that 3 of our lads are faced with in jail. Secondly, to point out that there are another 8 now on trial and another 10 pending trial.
Ricky, we reunited.
Absolutely.
We were fighting for you over 30 years ago when you was behind bars.
That's right, yeah.
We're still here today, mate, and we want justice.
Get in.
Because this meeting, or any other meeting, can be classified by the legal beavers as a conspiracy.
In 1973, Ricky Tomlinson and Des Warren were 2 of 24 building workers charged under an 1875 conspiracy law for their part in organising the first national builders' strike. The jailing of the Shrewsbury Pickets was not an isolated incident, more the start of a concerted campaign to criminalise rank-and-file trade union activists. In the 30 years since their imprisonment, we have witnessed the increasing use of laws aimed at weakening organised workers' ability to defend living standards and working conditions.
At the time of the Shrewsbury trials and that, the building industry had the highest fatality rate of any industry. It was equivalent actually to that of the mining industry and the farming industry put together. Even on major sites, you'd be very, very lucky if you could find a toilet. You were very, very lucky, or almost impossible, if you got soaked at 8 o'clock in the morning, somewhere to go and dry your clothes, so you worked in them clothes all day.
Working conditions were appalling. You know, men were being killed on building sites, still are, because of shortcuts, because of employers who want to do the thing as cheaply as possible.
We've got, in the building industry, more than a death a day. More than a death a day. It's literally a bloodbath. We have 30,000 registered accidents a year, and last year there was over 200 deaths. Now, one of them was recently killed only 3 weeks ago before Christmas. Working in a tower crane, the tower crane collapses, and when we inspect it, we find that one of the main staunches has been defective, if not weeks, months. So therefore, there hasn't been a regular safety inspection. And the maximum the firm can receive in fines for negligence is £100. And that's what it's worth to a building trade worker. That's what his life's worth, £100.
The building industry has always been difficult to organise, with no fixed workplace as sites open and close. This made it easier for anti-union employers to operate the lump system. Contractors would pick up men on a daily basis and pay them cash in hand. No cards, no income tax, but no overtime or layoff pay, and no insurance or safety regulations either.
The difference between a site where you've got trade union organisation and the shop stewards continually go into management with issues of safety, and the management here, we're pleased to say, immediately deal with it. But where you get a job which is full of the lump, where they're working in small units, the men are literally working for a small employer, then they're a law unto themselves. They don't care whether there's a toe board missing from here or a handrail missing up there. That means work to replace it. And their attitude is, well, that's not my job, that's somebody else's. Let me get on with the job of earning a lump sum payment, you see. And of course, the whole situation of safety deteriorates where the lump labour is operating. Because if they can cut corners on the safety regulations, they can save themselves literally thousands of pounds on a single job.
With 2,411 workers killed on building sites in the 10 previous years, and with over 30,000 serious injuries, the 1972 National Building Strike had to challenge the lump system if wages and working conditions were to be improved. Tens of thousands of workers downed tools around Britain as pickets spread the dispute.
You can ask the police, and I'm quite sure they will confirm what I'm saying. There is no lorry gone through here today. I'm not telling you any lies. No lies. At all. No.
It had been a torrid year for the Tory government, led by Edward Heath. The miners, with their flying pickets and the support of thousands of engineering workers, had closed down the government stockpile of coal at the Saltley Coke depot, becoming the first group of workers to break through a government-imposed pay freeze. Later that summer, an even bigger show of working-class solidarity had forced the release of 5 dockers jailed in Pentonville Prison for refusing to recognise the government's Industrial Relations Court.
Hold your banners up and let's be on this strike. Hold them up high. Show your banners. Show your solidarity. We are free trade unions. And we're going to get 5 comrades out of that concentration camp.
But the construction industry's employers and the lump system were a more difficult challenge for building workers' pickets, who found themselves up against flying strike breakers.
The helicopter being used was a £50,000 Jet Ranger, and in all it made 6 trips carrying 4 workmen each time from a secret airfield nearby.
It's a very, very difficult industry to organise because we're so fragmented. That's why the government of the day picked on us, because they knew we didn't have the strength of the miners or the dock workers.
We knew that we had quite a problem concerning the strike. We knew that we had 2/3 of the industry that weren't in the trade union movement, and we knew that we had one hell of a problem on our hands. In the North Wales area, they had more than the task of other areas because they had a very uneven share of lumpers and non-unionists, etc., and a very sparse on the ground as regards to active trade unionists. So the number of active trade unions being that small, the strain was tremendous. This was the start of the flying pickets in the North Wales area, and if you like, this was the start of all the events leading up to the Shrewsbury 24 lads being finally convicted.
The national minimum rate for the building trade was £20 for a skilled worker and £17 for a labourer. The strike aimed to gain fundamental improvements in the industry, including a £1 an hour basic wage and a 35-hour week. The official stoppage in an industry notoriously difficult to organise surprised the employers as flying pickets became increasingly effective in stopping supplies and closing down non-union sites.
We went on coaches, we went on cars up and down North Wales. Some sites we'd meet blokes, we'd pull them off there, we'd then probably go around to another site the next day and we'd see them there, you know, and we'd pull them off again. There was some persistent, but in the main, a lot of them came off. There was never any trouble.
I think that point Bob's making there, there was quite a number of lumpers in the area, and they'd been out on strike at the request of the stewards. And I say at the request because, you know, if anyone who knows anything about the industry knows that you can't go and drag people off against the will.
The only time we had any trouble was on a couple of sites. One site in particular was up at the top side of Hollywood, site in Brentford to be exact, where the lads approached the site. The agent came out with his camera first of all, and the lads said, "Well, just put that away." Anyway, they took the camera off him. Next thing we knew, he'd gone back into the house and came out with a shotgun. Now, obviously, we had to act very quickly, because if someone's got a shotgun pointed out, you don't know what the hell's in it. If that had gone off, and he'd all intentions of using it because he made that statement, this could have blinded people or this fake done something terrible. This was reported to the police, and they said they would be taken further. But up to date, and that's going back 16 months, nothing whatsoever has been done about it.
Having gone round these particular sites, the police had quite an easy task, because all they had to do, in fact, was follow the particular flying pickets, which they did do. The police went round, escorted them from site to site, and at no time made any arrests whatsoever.
We were accompanied at all times by the police, and a couple of them were senior officers. A couple of them were detective inspectors, you know. And not only did they accompany us, at the end of the day, they actually thanked me and Tessie Warren for conducting the pickets the way it's been carried out.
After 12 weeks, a settlement was won, which, although short of the claim, resulted in the builder's biggest increase for many years, providing a £6 increase for craftsmen and £5 for labourers.
And part of the thing that we went on strike for was better health and safety, and we achieved that. We got a shorter working week, and we got a few extra quid in our wage packets.
Never before had virtually all the claims that we'd gone out for, any trade union gone out for, had been met.
There's nothing wrong with the law. The real problem is one of enforcement. Following the disturbing evidence of intimidation from many areas during the national building strike, I intend, once again, to draw the attention of my chief constables to the provisions of the law and discuss with them what further action they might take.
After the strike ended, a call went out from the National Federation of Building Trade Employers to all their members to help compile a dossier on the flying pickets. Then the employers brought pressure to bear on Robert Carr, the Tory Home Secretary, through backbench Tory MPs to arrest the 24 Shrewsbury building workers and make an example of them. The key incident, which was made the excuse for the trial, occurred on a McAlpine site in Telford. The High Sheriff of Denbighshire and controller of the police force which brought the charges is a McAlpine's director and Sir Alfred McAlpine's son-in-law, Peter Bell. Sir Alfred McAlpine is himself a past High Sheriff of the county. This is the McAlpine family home in North Wales.
The establishment had learned from the imprisoning of people from the Industrial Relations Act. And therefore, having been defeated on that, and it was a major, significant defeat, that they had to re-establish their authority. They chose to do it in a press build-up, nothing to do with the Industrial Relations Act, on a question of intimidation, on a question of violence, and in fact, they ended up doing the Shrewsbury lads under the Conspiracy Act, which is a very difficult piece of legislation to prove your innocence.
3 lads were done on conspiracy, unlawful assembly, and on them 2 points, may I say this? On conspiracy, you had your democratic rights stripped away from you. That's the citizens of this nation. Because this meeting, or any other meeting, can be classified by the legal beavers as a conspiracy. Secondly, on the question of unlawful assembly, every picket line, every group of workers can now be picked off by the legal board on the basis of unlawful assembly. And this is what the Shrewsbury trial is all about.
The strike was over, we're back at work, and I'm living now in a little council house in North Wales. Got 2 little lads, and Marley, my first wife. And there was a knock on the door one night, dark night, 2 detectives come and said, Bricky Thompson, blah, blah, blah. And took us off to the local police station. And then a couple of the lads were there in the police station, and one thing and another, and we just said, don't say nothing. Anyway, the next thing is we were bundled into a van, police van, and carted off to Shrewsbury. To Shrewsbury, where we were fingerprinted, photographed. There was police vans, there was police cars, there was policemen with dogs, taking this little one van of us with the lads in all the way. And that's when I knew that this wasn't an ordinary thing about a strike that had finished 5 months ago. I knew that there was something really, really serious.
The police started making inquiries, and none of our brothers were taken down to the local police station and were held there for 4 to 5 hours, interrogated in various ways. Some were threatened that when they finally got the charge sheet out, it would read worse than that of the Cray twins. When they finally did come for me, they'd have a charge ready for me, which would probably land me in jail for the minimum of 2 years and probably up to life, you know, well, I just laughed.
After a dossier of information on picketing during the strike was submitted to Robert Carr, 210 charges were brought against the pickets. But all the charges were dropped with the exception of the conspiracy charge, unlawful assembly and affray.
Instead of taking us on the small stuff, they took us on the big stuff. And this is what I believe conspiracy, this is the way it operates, you know. Hearsay evidence can be brought into account, and your lifestyle, your background, when they don't even go into the main points of their allegations, you know.
When we got to the courthouse, I couldn't get in, they wouldn't let me in. There was hundreds and hundreds, and we've got the photograph to prove it, hundreds and hundreds of police outside. It was surrounded, it was ringed. And there was police underneath in the car park, and there was police with dogs, and there was a police helicopter. There was fellas on top of this bloody monument with cameras. This is, and the fella said to me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going in there." He said, "Policeman, you can't go in there." I said, "Well, I'm not particularly bloody bothered, but I'm one of the defendants." He said, "Oh, but..." He said, "Well, you better bloody well get in there."
Made us change our minds about the government. I never dreamt that such a thing would happen. The case was political, definitely political, because the start of the trial, there was at least 1,000 policemen all around the court. And when we went around the back to park our car, there must have been 15 or 20 policemen with dogs around the back. So it has to be a political case, otherwise there wouldn't be so much police knocking around.
Dad wanted to go in, and his uncle was with us, but they wouldn't let only one. And yet when we got in the court, there was plenty of seats. Well, there was more policemen than, you know.
The court was full of police inside.
Full of police.
The 6 of us were in the cell. The 6 of us who were charged with these charges of conspiracy and one thing and another. And a couple of the barristers, 2 or 3 of the barristers came down. And they said, "Listen, we've been offered a deal. And the deal is this. If you plead guilty, you will be fined £50 each. The union will pay the £50, and you'll be back home with your families for 12 o'clock noon." And 4 of the lads said, "We'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it." And he came to me and I said, "I'm not taking that." I said, "I've never been in trouble with the police in my life." I said, "And I've done nothing wrong. It was an official strike, and I'd done what I was elected to do by the lads where I live." And Desi Warden said, "Don't even ask me. I'm not bloody pleading guilty." And give the other 4 their due. They all said, "If you're pleading not guilty, then we're pleading not guilty." So the jury is 8-4. It's 8-4. We've gone to jail for the night. They've gone home for the night. So they come back the next day, and the judge said, "I'll accept the majority verdict at 10-2." And 2 of the jury changed their mind, and we actually got convicted on a 10-2 verdict. You know, 10-2. So it turned out later on that the court usher had gone into the jury room. Now, I don't know if this is allowed or whether it's in, I don't know, but I know it's true because I'll tell you for why in a minute. He went into the jury room and said, "I don't know what the score is. You know, how long do you want to be here? They're only going to get fined 50 quid, and the union's going to pay the fine."
They came into the room where the jury was, and they said, "Reach a decision as quickly as you can. If you don't reach it now, you'll be here over Christmas."
The trial judge, Mr. Justice May, declared that deterrent sentences were necessary. There is irrefutable evidence that messages were sent from the government to the prosecution QC during the trial. John Carpenter was given a suspended sentence of 9 months. John Mackenzie Jones was given 9 months on each of the 3 charges to run concurrently. John Clewock and Kenneth O'Shea were given 9 months suspended sentence. Ricky Tomlinson was sentenced to 3 concurrent sentences of 2 years each. Des Warren was sentenced to 3 years on each charge to run concurrently.
When the judge started giving out the sentences, if so-and-so suspended, so-and-so suspended. Now, Mackie Jones was the first one. Mackie Jones wasn't even at the meeting where the conspiracy took place. He was the treasurer. He'd come, got the few bob that had been sent in from the likes of the miners and other building workers and stuff like that. And he got off. He wasn't there. He wasn't there when the proposal was made about going on picketing. He wasn't there during the vote. Nothing. Mackie Jones got, and I think he got the worst sentence of anyone. When I got 2 years on each, the jury foreman and another fella jumped up in the jury box and a squabble took place. A bit of a squabble with the other jurymen. And then the next thing is 2 of them run out and slam the bloody door. And the judge didn't know, he was a bit flabbergasted. And he said, bring them men back in, because he still had to sentence Desi, you know. So the next thing is he sent for Desi. Desi come back in. Desi made a statement, of course, and then Desi got 3 years on each.
When they said the 3 years and the 3 years and the 3 years, it added up to 9, I actually almost collapsed because I thought, you know, my children, 9 years. And then he said to run concurrently. That didn't mean anything to me either.
In order to gain the convictions, prosecutors presented an image of violence and intimidation during the trial, using still photographs which they had reordered to support their case against Des Warren.
And this side was the one that the judge claimed was full of horrifying violence, pickets chasing the men off the side with sticks, and just mayhem on that side at Telford. The coaches arrived alongside this junction here. The pickets moved onto the site up this direction. They went amongst the building workers, who immediately started coming off the site and formed up with the Des Warren outside Site 6 office. And we can see the building workers have left the site. They've joined the picket leaders outside Site 6 office. Well, what we're trying to say is that the prosecution and the police shuffle these photographs around. It has virtually built up a very strong case against Des Warren. But as you've seen them shown consecutively, the photographs, that Des Warren was at no time on the Telford site. Well, in the first major trial, they shuffle the photographs to give the worst possible interpretation. Now, if you look at number 1, shows the pickets coming towards the site workers, or it could be looked that way. Could look as though it is the building workers on the site getting away off the site before the pickets come towards them. Looks as though the more pickets are arriving at the site. Well, Des Warren's trial lasted 12 weeks. A total of 27 charges of violence and intimidation throughout the trial. But at no time were these charges proceeded with, because he was only charged on common law conspiracy, fighting and causing an affray, and unlawful assembly.
A savage campaign in the Tory press condemned the pickets for violence, when in fact they had taken lawful means to spread the strike.
The news of the world absolutely slaughtered him, and we got the most horrendous threatening letters. Not only threatening him, but threatening me and the children as well.
The day after the jailings, the 20th of December. This is an example of what we put up with before that as well.
It's awe-inspiring, really, having never had anything to do with prisons before. I don't think I've even taken a second glance at a prison before. The clanking gates and keys and being shown through several doors before you eventually get to the appointed meeting place. It's very difficult to speak to your husband surrounded by policemen and guards and other prisoners and their wives and families.
Des was passed from pillar to post, probably was in more jails than murderers were.
They kept moving us about from prison to prison. Sometimes they would come in at midnight and did you say put your stuff in a pillowcase, put it in, wouldn't tell our families where we were.
Well, the idea of moving them frequently was so that demonstrations couldn't be held outside the prisons because nobody knew where they were. You know, they might be in Leicester one day and somewhere else the next. You know, it was hard on all of us, particularly the children. You know, it's hard for children going to school and, you know, the other kids saying your dad's in prison. They didn't know that he was innocent of any crime. At one point, when he was in prison, he'd been on hunger strike, and they had him carrying metal doors up and down stairs, obviously trying to, well, in my mind, trying to kill him.
Oh, he has good mates. All the lads from this area are solid, like, behind them, you know, all the contractors. But it's other parts of the country that may not know what's transpired because without you dealing with these things, you wouldn't believe that such things happen.
Every building worker in the country has had a rise in their wages through this strike and the picketing, and I hope that they'll stand by these boys and get them released.
My son has got doing 9 months jail for peaceful picketing, done no wrong in our eyes, done nobody any harm, done no destructed nothing or done any harm to anyone. All he has done is distributed 10 shillings per man on the sites for a bag of chips and a packet of cigarettes. It's as simple as that. You know, you got anything to add to that, haven't you?
No, my son's been wrongly convicted.
We wouldn't wear clothes, used to crap on the floor, wouldn't work, would never ever shut our own cell door. Then we went on hunger strike for 31 days. We'd have still been on it now if we hadn't have had a bloody... we got a telegram from the House of Commons of some Labour MP saying things are really moving, important that you come off this hunger strike now, which we did.
But the country then was hell-bent on them getting appeal, but in the meantime they're rotting in jail. There's a new movement going on, it's to get Labour in power. And the call went out to everyone, Labour in, and the Pickets will get the Pickets out. After Labour did get in, then we approached Roy Jenkins and asked him what he was going to do about these lads who've been wrongly victimised and charged with conspiracy sent to jail. And his father, by the way, was jailed as a minor in 1926. You would have thought he'd had a big heart for these lads, but he didn't. He said, British justice being what it is today, if they're innocent, they will be found so, and if guilty, so be it. And he just walked away.
We actually spent more time in jail under the Labour Party than we did under the Tories, and I think that speaks volumes.
Where there is one member of a union who is now partially blind based on the fact that he was kicked off a scaffold.
If the gallery cannot keep quiet, I will have it cleared.
If this goes on,
I have no alternative, but the police will have to come in.
On his release from prison, the TUC refused Ricky Tomlinson the right to speak at Congress in support of Des Warren's release.
It wasn't a police plot. wasn't an employer's plot. The state was involved at the highest level. Everybody knew. 2 Labour Party conferences, 2 TUC conferences, Amnesty International adopted me as a prisoner of conscience. Everybody knew that the Shrewsbury Pickets had been set up.
This is supposed to be a democracy, a democratic country. And as a democratic country, how can my husband be a criminal because he spoke up for his rights and the rights of his fellow men? It just isn't true, is it? It isn't a democratic country at all. There's no such thing as freedom of speech. Not here. And not now.
There was a conspiracy. There was a conspiracy on this issue, but it was with Edward Heath, Robert Carr, and the police, and that is my belief, and nothing will ever alter that from my mind.
Two very important elements in the police function in this country are firstly that we must never in any circumstances appear to be the tool of government or the tool of any political party. And as a policeman, I don't think that what we call crimes of violence, though they naturally give rise to a great deal of heart-searching and regret, I don't think that they are anything like as severe a threat to the maintenance of tranquility in this country as the tendency of people to use violence to achieve political or industrial ends. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as a policeman of many, many years of experience, that's the worst crime in the book. I think it's even worse than murder.
Every picket line, every group of workers can now be picked off by the legal board on the basis of unlawful assembly.
The imprisonment of the Shrewsbury Pickets remains one of the most vicious attacks inflicted on the labour movement since the Second World War.
The government and the TUC have unveiled their new agreement on pay and industrial relations. It's the product of weeks of negotiations which took place against a background of growing industrial unrest. The TUC, meanwhile, will give guidance to unions aimed at improving industrial relations and preventing strikes, particularly in vital public services.
Ballots before a strike is called are strongly recommended. Picketing should, it says, be confined to the premises of the parties to the dispute or to their suppliers or customers, except in what are called exceptional circumstances.
Since 1972, successive governments have sought to limit workers' abilities to organise effectively, whether through so-called voluntary restraints or the imposition of laws, and the criminalising of rank-and-file activists has been a key part of this strategy. We cannot fight against the fresh attacks now being aimed at the working class without also demanding that the case of the Shrewsbury 24 be reopened, the men's names cleared, and that the real conspirators are exposed.
The Shrewsbury Pickets were fighting for better pay for our members, the end of casualisation and safer sites. And today the construction workers face the same battle. And those found guilty, in my opinion, weren't they criminals? they were political prisoners. And that's the way I would say the majority of UCAP members felt at that time. But I've got to say that leadership in my union at that time had a lot of feelings. And, you know, that I'm one of the first to hold my hand up to say that, yeah, we did fail at that time. And we want to create a position where we can reverse the faults that happened in the political leadership of UCAP.
It was the establishment and the government at the time sort of putting people in their place, putting building workers in their place. And, you know, what happened to the Shrewsbury Pickets was outrageous, to be frank. And it's a poor reflection. And you can't correct what happened to, in particular, Des Warren and also Ricky. But what you can do, you can go some way to actually saying sorry.
I was a young shop steward on the Liverpool docks back in the 1970s, and indeed we came out on strike in support of the Shrewsbury Pickets and what was undoubtedly an act of aggression against trade unions and trade union organisation by the ruling elite, by the ruling classes. It's of great dismay to me that Labour governments that have been elected since then have not reversed this injustice, and I'm 100%, as is Unite, behind the Shrewsbury campaign for justice.
Our union, the RMC, supports the Shrewsbury demonstrations that are taking place, that we won't give up until there's justice done for the Shrewsbury men and women.
The legacy since the 1972 strike is an unregulated building industry, an appalling accident and death rate, and renewed blacklisting of workers. We ask for the Home Office to release all secret papers related to the Shrewsbury case and to instigate a public inquiry.
We can't get any information. I've been to the National Archives to get my files out, and it was a waste of time because all the relevant points are blacked out. And the only reason it says at the end is that this information is withheld in the interest of national security. So in other words, I'm still classed as a subversive or some sort of terrorist, and I think that's outrageous.
We want a public inquiry because we want to expose what went on, why this group of workers were targeted, and also we want to expose the role of the state in what happened to the Shrewsbury Pickets and others.
When I look back, it's so unfair how they suffered. You know, so unfair, particularly Dennis. You know, in his weakened state, the things that they made him do. You know, deliberately to crack it. They wouldn't have cracked him anyway. He was much too strong for that. He was a man of principle. And that's how I'll always remember him.
They were responsible for the death of Desi Warren because Desi Warren died from drug-induced Parkinson's, from the liquid cosh and other things that they gave him when he was in prison.
I'm here because I'm seeking justice, not only for my husband, but that is the main concern, but also for myself and my family, because it completely smashed us.
And I'd like my name cleared, not for my sake, but for my children's sake, and more importantly, for my grandchildren's sake.
It will happen. I know it will happen at some point. If it's now, it'll be later. It will happen. It happened for the Toll Puddle martyrs. It will happen for us.